Hey everybody, it's Bob Crossan, Senior Managing Editor for Water and Waste Digest. Today I have with me Jake Stones. He is VP Project Executive for McCarthy Building Companies, as well as Michaela Rempkowski. She is Integrated Design Director for McCarthy Building Companies. We're going to be taking a deeper dive into CMAR and DB project delivery methods to gain a better understanding of how they work and why you may want to choose one for a future project. We also have an article on this on our website, so you can check that out too. So yeah, thank you guys. I appreciate the time that you're giving us and talking about these delivery methods today.
Of course, it's one of my favorite things. So I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you for having us on.
Yeah, I think alternative delivery is very interesting, and it's becoming a growing conversation. And I think talking about it and kind of explaining what these things do and why they work the way they work, and gives a good framework for a lot of utilities out there who are working on projects, or even contractors for that matter. So, I wanted to start with CMAR, so Construction Manager at Risk. Could you explain what CMAR is, just to start?
Yeah, CMAR is a project delivery method, collaborative project delivery method where the owner has a contract with a construction manager and then separate contracts with the designer for the design of the project.
Hmm. So, could you talk a little bit about how that functions then? Like, how does that differ from some of the other methods that are traditional? I know design, bid, build is very traditional method, but how would it, for example, differ from that?
Yeah, one of the major differences is that CMAR and most of the collaborative delivery methods allow a contractor involved in the process or in that delivery much earlier than the traditional methods for delivery, like design, bid, build, where you would design a project, take it to the street, get bids, and then so the contractor is seeing those plans for the first time when he's actually pricing it and proposing on the project.
Mhm. Yeah. So, what are some reasons that a utility might want to choose CMAR over other methods that are out there? Is it just simply for that collaborative effort in bringing that contractor in earlier, or are there other benefits to it beyond that?
Yeah, I'll let Michaela take this one. She spends a lot of time with our clients discussing this exact that exact question, and so I'll let her handle that.
I was going to let Jake run with it because he's a pro at CMAR. And design build is kind of my favorite. So I was hoping to get those questions. But to talk about benefits of even both, of collaborative delivery in general, collaborating with the contractor early on is really going to bring you cost certainty, which is really, really important to utilities, especially in today's market where escalation is going through the roof, coming back down, going back up, and you never know kind of what's going on in this market, but we can bring that cost certainty and we can bring that predictability and make utilities more comfortable with what's going on. Another thing is that as an integrated design director, I used to be a designer in my past life. And if it was performance, if I could design something for performance, I always designed it perfectly for performance. And if it fit on a drawing sheet, then it was perfect. It fit my performance expectations and it was perfect on a drawing sheet. But the problem is that once it got to the field, maybe it wasn't constructible. Maybe it decreased productivity. I never really thought about how are these builders going to put the formwork up, or how are they going to fit in the space between the pipe and my junction box, things like that. So what it really brings is this outside perspective of this is how it actually gets built. People have to fit in between these spaces, and we have to get this pipe in through this wall, and you have another building over here, and we're just not going to be able to fit equipment between there. So the designer really gets the perspective of a builder who's actually out there trying to build the things that we just imagine up. And so there's two benefits. And then finally, I would say a big one is schedule as well. A contractor coming in early can tell you, hey, this is how you can optimize your design for schedule if you want to meet a certain deadline. And so saying, hey, maybe the aeration basin and the headworks are critical path, and everything else you can kind of slow down in design. But if we can get that foundation for the aeration basin, we can get started next year, and we can get done a year early. Whereas if you didn't have that contractor input on any of that, you kind of would just have them saying, well, it's going to take me 3 years and it's going to cost you a bunch of money to squeeze in this tight spot. And escalation is like this. So your contingency is really, really high. So you get a lot of certainty out of collaborative delivery.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna pitch the DB questions to you now. Like, what is DB, and how does it compare then to CMAR? What are some of the differences? Could you bounce off of that other method?
Yeah, I'll start off. But Jake's actually working on the largest design build in America, I believe.
Yeah.
So I'll pitch it off to him for real world experience. I've worked on a couple smaller design builds as a designer, but the biggest difference is that design build is a contractor and a designer on one team, especially in the water industry. The brilliance behind that is a lot of utilities are low on staff. So it reduces the paperwork, it reduces the headache to go between the contractor and the designer and kind of pass that off. You just have one team to go to. The benefit for the designer and the contractor is that they're working together. They're both thinking about that project success. It's not individual goals, it's a team goal of project success. And how do we sit next to each other and talk about constructability while we're sitting next to each other instead of passing it through the owner? Whereas a CMAR, you still have those two separate contracts. You don't necessarily always have the same project goals. Hopefully we're working on it from the beginning where we're partnering a lot better. But you still have those two separate contracts. So it's a really tough partnership that takes some time, whereas a design build right out the gate, you have that opportunity. And then some other things that I see is schedule enhancement. So you can start a little bit earlier, 30% design, because you're working with that contractor to figure out what needs to be designed. And you should see some cost savings because you get performance specs, which are a lot less work for the designer. You're getting that schedule savings, you're improving productivity, things like that. So generally you see a lot of cost savings in design build versus other collaborative delivery methods. But Jake, do you have something about it's more real world?
Yeah, I think you nailed it, Michaela. One of the big advantages of design build project delivery is that the owner only has a single source for contracts. The designer typically and the contractor will form a joint venture, or one will work for the other. One in the lead, but the owner only has to sign and manage one set of contracts. Where with CMAR, he has a separate contract with both the designer and the contractor, and expects them to collaborate right at some level without having a direct contractual relationship. So there are some challenges, but I think both have their advantages. And it also has to do with the risk profile, right? And when the owner wants to lock in a price, right? That is one of the other big considerations is there's different models where in CMAR, the contractor will price the designs that are issued by the designer at different stages of the design development, right? And then at some point we'll lock in a guaranteed maximum price, to which they're at risk for. Under design build, there's progressive design build, or there's fixed price design build, but at some point the owner is going to expect a price, right? And so depending on the owner's risk strategy, that could be a big consideration in which delivery method they choose.
Yeah. So touching on the cost savings element, it's really interesting because you always think about like the traditional design bid build being supposedly a better way to get a better price because you're opening it up to all the competition and stuff like that, but you're also opening yourself up to lesser quality work, I would imagine, as well. Whereas you can verify, I've worked with this team before, I can use these folks and they collaborate well together. You can kind of establish better relationships, I imagine, with utilities and contractors and designers.
Yeah, I've both design build and construction management at risk. Both methods give the owner more flexibility and more say in who's going to complete that work. So if an entity has knows the contracting community and understands there's certain contractors they want to participate in, some that don't have a good reputation or known to not have good quality, they come with the CMAR design build. You can use those delivery methods to put in pre-qualifications, right? And ensure that you're getting quality for your project.
Yeah. So is there any reason why someone would choose DB over CMAR or CMAR over DB, or does it really just come down to how that utility wants to manage those contracts then at the highest level, or is it deeper than that?
I think under design build you can move a little bit quicker. So it depends on the owners or the entity's goals. If they need a project that needs to be delivered very, very quickly, but is a complex project, then design build may be right for them. CMAR may give them a little more control over what gets built as they manage two separate contracts with an owner and designer, but it may take a little bit longer, just a little bit. I think both methods have an advantage over traditional design bid build, which probably takes the longest to deliver any projects. But design bid build definitely has its place. If your construction work is very linear or simple, or it's a project that you've built multiple times before, right? So something repetitive, then I think design bid build has its place, and you may not need to take the effort or time to do a collaborative delivery project. So we like to think of CMAR, design bid build, and design build as all tools in the belt of a utility that needs to get work done. And we like to be versed in all of them, such that that they can choose which ones, right? And there's a lot of great resources in the industry, whether it's the Water Design Build Council, DBIA. They both do a lot of education surrounding how to match a delivery method to your project, right, and to what you're trying to accomplish in your project goals. So there's some great resources on exactly how to choose that right project, but it's really not a one size fits all.
Hmm. So
Yeah, and I would say some of the,
go ahead.
oh, go ahead. I would say some of the biggest differences, particularly between CMAR and design build, are that speed, but also the risk profile and the size of the project. So CMARs, you're going to have a full pre-construction team on the contractor side, and your design team, two separate contracts. It's going to take a little bit more time, cost you more money, and so you want your projects to be a little bit bigger. Whereas design build, they can almost be any size because you just have that single team. So I always suggest that if it's a smaller project but still has a high risk profile, design build is a great option for that.
Yeah, there's also a lot of projects in our industry that get built as upgrades to existing facilities, right? Working in those facilities can be very complex and very difficult. Sometimes there's not good data on what is buried or what is hidden, right? Or what operating challenges you're going to encounter as you engage in a large project. And CMAR and design build lend themselves really well to help navigating that uncertainty, because if you let those very complex projects out in the traditional design build method, sometimes the owner has limited access to what the contractor's plan was ahead of receiving those bids and being committed to having a contractor on their site.
Yeah, I mean, these are just two of these alternative methods, and I've heard of several others. I mean, you mentioned even progressive design build, fixed design build, but there are other ones out there as well. What do you think is contributing to this exploration of project delivery methods and finding alternatives to help out and for certain projects? Is it just market driven based on what utilities want, or is it also coming from like the contractor side as well?
I've seen a lot, so I'm going to speak holistically, but a lot of the exploration of project delivery, I think, is legislation. So for a long time in water utilities, design build, or even CMAR, collaborative delivery at all wasn't accepted. There's still a lot of states that it doesn't exist in. A great example of that is Oklahoma. For a year they had design build, and then they realized, okay, we're not ready for this. We're going to pull that back. They released it with their CMAR, so CMAR is still going on, but they're still trying to figure out what design build looks like in their state. And a lot of states are going through those same growing pains. And as legislation is becoming more popular to allow design build and CMAR into their practices, we're going to see it get more popular. It's going to take a little bit of, it's slow paced because, I mean, in water, we're risk averse. We try really, really hard to do what works so we can maintain that quality of water and maintain a great environment. But as we start seeing successes in this collaboration and maintaining that schedule and maintaining those costs and looking at like what Jake said, that was on point. We call them MOPOs, maintenance of plant operations. So when we're working on existing sites, or we're expanding existing sites, or adding in new technologies at those existing sites, you really got to know what's going on in the field so that they can maintain that operation. And the person that's going to be doing it should be at the table to let you know, hey, there's 156 MOPOs on site. Let's plan this together, or let's design in these features. So I think a lot of utilities are slowly going to start to see the benefits of that, and push for this legislation, and push for the exploration of other delivery methods that might even further enhance that that maintenance of plant operations and that certainty.
I think for a long time there was conception, and I'll get back to answering your question, Bob, about why the market is expanding collaborative delivery. But I think there was a misconception, and there still exists a misconception, that the design bid build, just going out to the market and getting the cheapest prices is in the best interest or provides the best value. I think the market is driving towards collaborative delivery because the experience matters, right? And there's a cost to the experience. And I think if you've ever worked on a collaborative delivery project, I think one thing that people do them successfully understand is that it's a joy to go to work, right? Construction and project engineering or engineering construction business can be a tough business, right? There's complex problems to solve. It can be very stressful at times, and collaboration makes that a lot easier. And so the experience is better. I also think that the market is it's no secret that our infrastructure in the United States is regularly rated at about a C-, right? That's usually what they say.
Rated poorly.
Right. It's rated pretty poorly. It needs a lot of work, right? And oftentimes our government comes and provides funds and financial assistance to get those things done. And when that happens, there's usually time limits set to the spending of that money, right? And so collaborative delivery allows you to move and get that money spending, get these projects in the ground much quicker. Typical water projects can take 4 to 5 years from conception, right, to completion. The one I'm on right now, is going to be a decade by the time the final commissioning is done to build a 350 million gallon plant for the Houston metro area, right, to produce enough water to serve this community. And so any way you can shorten that, right, will shorten the cost, because one of the biggest project costs is a staff to be on site running this, right? Our industry and the things that we do are not something that can be exported, right? You have to be here, and there's a big cost of doing that. And so if you can shorten the project life cycle, right, you can save utilities big dollars. So in general, the larger, more complex projects, they're, especially in water infrastructure, they're made for collaborative delivery. And I think that's why you see it growing so much. Like Michaela said, the states vary on which states there's a big hodgepodge of what's acceptable in each state and how you can apply these collaborative delivery methods. But what we see is a pressure to deregulate some of that, right, across all of the states, and easier for utilities to use all of those tools we talked about that are in the belt, right, and not put restrictions on how and when they can use them, but really allow them to use them and be good stewards of that tool belt.
You kind of answered my next question, which was how do you foresee these things changing? And it sounds like it's very much on that legislative and regulatory side of like pushing for these things to be accepted more broadly and allowing utilities and contractors to explore new methods that will bring projects to market quicker and at better cost, and even cheaper at times. I guess the only other question I really had was kind of like the infrastructure bill, should it pass, like what kind of impact that would have. And you kind of touched on it about if the funding becomes available and it has time limits on it, you're going to see more of these methods being used or wanting to be used because of the speed and expedited delivery that it can provide.
Yeah, I have one client here in Texas who just in the last year invited Michaela and I to come educate their entire staff about collaborative delivery methods for that exact reason. They saw a lot of funding in the pipeline that was coming their way. They have a lot of needs, a lot of infrastructure that needed to get built out. and they needed to understand how they could deliver it quicker. And so they invited us just to do that. And that's a growing trend. We see that a lot. And I think it's a great, there's great tools out there, but education is key, right? They're not going to use them unless they understand how they work, because change can be a little bit different, especially as mentioned earlier. The traditional way is to just put them all on the street and get the best lowest price, right? Which we know oftentimes mean the best value. So the market's headed that way. Some stats from the Design Build Institute of America say that 30 to 40% more projects year over year are going to be delivered via design build. They stay very close to that number and watch that trend. But the legislative action that's happening is moving us in the right direction. And I think eventually most of the states will deregulate it, the regulations that are in there now.
I think some other interesting points, and I'm an engineer, so you can kind of tell what's going on. I like extrapolate data, but it was the late 60s, early 70s when the Clean Water Act first came out. You saw a lot of infrastructure getting built. That's 40, 50 years ago. And so a lot of infrastructure is way past its lifetime. So this infrastructure bill with the even some of the COVID relief funds are really, really going to impact our industry, because we need this critical infrastructure, and regulations are just getting a little bit tougher with PFAS and lead and copper, pharmaceuticals. There's a lot coming out. So there's a lot of infrastructure that has to be built, a lot of infrastructure that has to be paid for. So we're going to see these getting more competitive. And you see it in WIFIA already. When it first came out, people didn't really know what it was. But now they really know the benefits to the rates and the benefits to the payback and all of those things, the interest rates that have come out in the last several years, which are insane, almost free. And it becomes more competitive. And when it becomes more competitive, you have to have that competitive advantage. So we see for things like WIFIA, doing collaborative delivery allows you to be shovel ready faster. And if you're more shovel ready, if your project's more developed, you're more likely to get that funding. And so we'll see a lot of states pushing for collaborative delivery to be not only in legislation, but widely used so that they can take advantage of these infrastructure bills and this financing opportunities and the better costs and things like that. Even now being on the construction side, I'm hearing a lot about how tariffs affected our market and how the steel market is affecting our market, hurricanes and Houston, things like that. And so having a contractor on board can really help you with those costs and evaluating that as well. And so taking advantage of that collaboration on the market conditions again, as it advances in climate change and things like that. So lots of benefits coming forward in terms of funding and paying for it.
Yeah, there's just it's getting ever more complex because of the increase of the added regulations on things. Like you were talking about lead and copper rule, you got PFAS stuff coming in the pipeline, you got MCLs on the way. Like there's just so many added things, and each one of those things adds so much more complexity to it, where if you can make something else less complex, you can deal with that complexity a little bit better. So yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, thank you guys so much for talking through this. It's very cool, very illuminating. I've learned a lot. I feel like I learned a lot last year talking to McCarthy about delivery methods as well. So it's great to reconnect with you all again this year. And for everyone who is watching, you can check out the video description for some information from McCarthy on some of these project delivery methods. I'll provide a link down there as well. And like I said, we have an article in our October issue that we'll be publishing on our website with this. So definitely check that out. That link will be in the description below as soon as it goes live. And thank you guys so much for being here.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you. This was wonderful.
Really enjoyed being here.